Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
That was your lesson. Rain pounded on the rooftop, drumming a frantic pulse that matched the pounding in my temples. I remember how I stood by the window, breath catching in short, ragged bursts, watching the raindrops shatter against the glass. Everything felt too close. My shirt clung to my back, damp from sweat, though I was indoors. The darkness outside was a mirror to the darkness swelling inside my chest. I whispered those words meant for her but spoken only in my head. Then I repeated them under my breath, staring at my own reflection. A single lamp lit the living room, casting flickering shadows on old family photographs. Kathy's picture was right there on the mantel, smiling in her wedding dress, standing beside me under the Californian sun. Time can be cruel. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. A message from a colleague about some sales report. Ordinary life persisted, oblivious to the storm inside me. I could feel my heart throb in my throat. I needed to breathe, to think. But I couldn't. All I could see in my mind's eye was the image of her body in someone else's arms. That memory, raw, humiliating, alive with the noises I wish I could unhear. Her breathy moans, the rustle of sheets, the squeak of the old training bench, it all blurred into one piercing hum that drilled through my skull. I closed my eyes, tried to shut it out. No use. When I first confronted the possibility of Kathy's betrayal, I half laughed. We'd been married for years. Comfortable, maybe too comfortable. Even so, I never believed it could happen to me. Other men get cheated on, not Ed Collins. Other men find themselves listening to rumors of their wives' indiscretions. Other men gather evidence and run DNA tests. But not me. I was the dependable husband who paid the bills, fixed the sink, planned the summer vacations. But life has a way of yanking the rug out from under your feet when you stand too sure of yourself. The storm outside seemed to amplify. Wind raked across the windows, forcing droplets sideways. A branch scraped the glass like nails on a chalkboard. I felt a pinch in my chest, a swirl of panic, and forced myself to let out a long breath. I had to gather them all. A part of me still can't believe I did it. Invited Kathy's parents, her sister, even her old uncle who never liked me much. I demanded they come, told them it was urgent, that it concerned Kathy's future. I offered no details. Maybe they guessed something was wrong, or maybe they didn't, but they came. And so the stage was set for the confrontation. My chest tightened. I checked the clock. 7:30. They would arrive soon, and she would be here too. The dread in my gut felt like acid, but behind that sour pain lurked something else, a cold, methodical calm. I reached up and turned off the lamp. Darkness pressed against me from all sides. For a moment, my mind flashed with images of Kathy and Jake. I had seen them in the locker room by the pool the night I stopped by her workplace unannounced. In the gloom, I could hear the echo of her laugh as it transformed into a ragged moan that didn't belong to me. That night I stayed quiet in the shadows, heart hammering, sweat trickling down my temples. I should have burst in. I should have confronted them right there. But some twisted reflex made me freeze, and I watched instead. They'd probably thought the building was empty. Or they didn't care. Jake was behind her, breath mingling with hers, bodies damp from the pool, from the heat of it all. She had on her red training swimsuit, half pulled down around her waist, and he pressed his mouth to her neck with a hunger that made my stomach heave. The overhead light flickered on the wet tiles, and their silhouettes twined into one. His hand slid around her hips, pulling her close. She let out a trembling sigh, and I remember that distinct sound because I'd only heard it once before, the day we'd first made love, years ago, in a cheap motel during a thunderstorm. A different time, a different man, a different woman. I caught every detail, the taut muscles in Jake's arms, the way her fingers dug into his shoulders, the slight arch in her spine as she surrendered to him. The shock of it paralyzed me. Something hollow opened up in my chest, and I forgot how to breathe. It was as if I watched a scene that couldn't be real. But it was real. Too real. The final confirmation. I left without a sound, not trusting myself to speak. The echo of water dripping from their bodies followed me as I slipped back into the night. My palms were clammy against the steering wheel when I drove away. I kept telling myself, this can't be happening. This can't be mine. But it was. I remember pulling into our driveway hours later, still numb. Found her in bed, hair damp from a shower, face turned away. She whispered a tired greeting. Nothing more. No sign of guilt. No hesitation in her voice. That was when I decided I needed proof. Real proof. Enough to make her realize there was no escape from the truth. So I turned to what my friend from the lab had suggested. A test that would confirm the fatherhood of our unborn child. Because, ironically, Kathy was pregnant. Or so she said, 3 weeks before that night. The timeline didn't add up. I told myself, if the baby is mine, I'll bury the suspicion. If it's not, then I'll expose her for lying to everyone. Because it wasn't just me she deceived. My folks, her sister, our circle of friends. Everyone believed in the perfect marriage. The DNA test arrived in the mail a few days before this storm. The result, I am not the father. Ito bile foirak. I repeated once more, letting the words roll quietly in the dark. Then the doorbell rang. I flicked the lamp back on. My eyes stung with the sudden brightness. Thunder rattled outside, making my heart flutter. I made my way to the hallway, forcing a neutral expression. The guests stepped in one after another. Her parents, polite but tense. Her sister, eyes flicking around anxiously. The old uncle, who gave me a scowl as if to say, "You'd better not waste my time." They settled in the living room, all looking to me for an explanation. A few minutes passed before Kathy finally arrived. She walked in, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing casual jeans and a sweater. I saw her glance around at the solemn faces, confusion etched across her features. I didn't move, just watched her from behind the couch, my breath controlled, my pulse fierce. "Ed?" she asked, voice trembling. No answer. I gestured for everyone to sit. Kathy perched on the edge of the sofa, as if not sure whether to stay or bolt. Her father folded his arms. Her mother twisted a tissue in her hands. The old uncle huffed, glaring at me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Pressed play on a voice recording. Her voice came through the speaker. But not the safe, gentle tone I knew. This one was throaty, excited, and laced with triumph. "You two looked amazing together." Then a click, followed by a low, breathy laugh. Silence. I set the phone down. Nobody moved. In the tension, I heard only the rain tapping on the windows. Her mother turned her face away, as though she'd just witnessed something unspeakable. Her sister reached for Kathy's hand, but Kathy pulled away, eyes downcast, refusing to deny anything. Because what was there to deny? I had more to say. I coughed, my throat tight, voice raw. Some of you might have guessed, some not. Let me fill in the blanks. Kathy's been involved with her boss, Jake Stanton, the head trainer at the pool. Her father clenched his fists so hard his knuckles went white. Her mother shut her eyes. Her sister looked like she might burst into tears. I swallowed, forcing myself to speak slowly. She lied to me. She lied to you, and she kept lying, even when I asked her about the baby. A wave of shock rustled through the room. The old uncle gave a sharp exhale. I inhaled, remembering how I first held that test result in my hands. The words 0% probability burned into my vision. A swirl of betrayal, humiliation, heartbreak, all tangling inside me. But I had told myself, no more illusions. Let her see how thoroughly she's destroyed our family. I spoke again, voice shaking. I ran a test, a DNA test. The baby isn't mine. Maybe you all want to blame me or pity me, or, Hell, I don't know. But I need you to understand this. She betrayed not just me, but every one of you who believed her. Believed in her. A hush enveloped the room. Rain hammered on the roof, an unrelenting soundtrack to this tragedy. I glanced at Kathy. She still stared at the floor, refusing to defend herself, refusing even to show remorse. Or maybe she was too shocked to speak. Her sister's eyes were wet with tears. She reached for Kathy again, but Kathy remained stiff, arms locked around her own waist, as though she were trying to hold herself together physically if not emotionally. Kathy's father inhaled through clenched teeth. "Kathy," he said, voice trembling with outrage. "Explain yourself." She looked up at him for a moment, only a moment, and turned away, no words forthcoming. I forced my voice steady. "She can't explain, because it's all right here in the test, in the phone calls, in what I've seen with my own eyes, and in that voice recording you just heard." I felt my anger surge, nearly boiling over. My breathing got heavier, and for a second, I thought I might let it all out, shout, scream, rage. But I stayed in control. The memory of them in the locker room hammered in my mind, the smells, the moans, the betrayal. I turned my gaze on her father. I loved her. "And I still respect you, your wife, your whole family. But you see how she made a joke out of our marriage." The father rubbed his temples, as if waging his own internal war. He looked at Kathy with fierce disappointment. The mother only shook her head in silent devastation. The sister was quietly sobbing now, tears streaming down her cheeks. The old uncle stared at the floor, jaw set. Kathy's voice, small and broken, finally emerged. I never meant to." She trailed off, as though words couldn't form. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You never meant to get caught?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. A bitter taste clung to my tongue. "Or you never meant to lie to everyone?" She said nothing, gaze locked on a spot of carpet. I shook my head. "Let's just say it. You jumped in with Jake. You needed excitement, attention, whatever you wanted to call it. You told me you were pregnant, but you never intended to figure out who the father was first." My voice was rising. I willed it down. She jerked back as though slapped. She tried to speak but stopped, as if words were choking her. My tone dropped low. "I'm not here to beg you to come back. I'm not here to cry and make you feel sorry." I called all of them. I gestured around the room, so they could hear the truth themselves. "So there's no confusion, no illusions of what you did, who you chose to be." Thunder rumbled. For a long moment, no one spoke. The father clenched and unclenched his fists, fighting some urge to lash out. Maybe at me for not catching this sooner, maybe at her for betraying the family. The tension in the air felt thick enough to slice with a knife. I saw the old uncle glare in my direction. He'd never liked me, claimed I was too controlling, too cold. Now he shifted uncomfortably, perhaps realizing he had misjudged the entire situation. My chest felt tight. I took a long breath. The words came out in a broken rasp. "You didn't just cheat on a man, Kathy. You made a fool of me, of your parents, your sister. You lied to every single person who trusted you." My voice cracked near the end. I paused, hoping to steady it, but my throat burned. Still, she said nothing in her defense. No denial, no protest, no tears, just silent acceptance, as if she were letting the accusations bury her. I stood up slowly. The floor creaked under my weight. Everyone in the room tensed. My hands trembled at my sides. I swallowed, locked my gaze on her. "You didn't just betray a husband," I said, my voice low and cold. "You signed your own sentence." Her eyes darted up in sudden alarm, and for the first time that night, I saw tears glisten. She let out a strangled cry, the first sound of raw emotion from her since we all sat down. It cut through the silence like a razor. But I was done. I stepped away from the couch, turned my back on her. Her father tried to speak, but the words failed him. The sister let out a sob, while her mother folded her arms around herself and rocked slightly, as though comforting her own pain. The uncle just shook his head in disgust. I crossed the threshold into the hallway, ignoring the hush of desperate movements behind me. I heard her stifled weeping, felt it cling to the air like a damp chill. For a moment, I wanted to turn back, to say something that might ease the agony in my chest. But there was nothing left to say. I reached for the front door. My hand shook as I gripped the handle, and I opened it, stepping out into the rain. A cold, stinging downpour met me. I pulled the door shut behind me, the latch clicking with a hollow finality. She let out another sound, some mixture of plea and grief, but it was muffled by the closing door. Let her talk to the darkness. Let her talk to an empty house. I breathed in the rain. Everything smelled of wet earth and heartbreak. Streetlights glowed faintly in the distance, and the wind whipped at my clothes. "This is it," I muttered. "This is who I am now." But the question lingered. Who was I now? The man who just walked away from a marriage that once meant everything. A fool who wasted years with a wife who'd rather chase some gym fantasy. A shell of a husband, holding on to a heartbreak that would keep me awake each night. Lightning flashed across the sky, revealing a quiet suburban street, trees thrashing in the wind. I could almost see my own reflection in the puddles, somebody I didn't recognize. A man undone by betrayal, forced into a lonely corner. I pressed forward, heading to my car, letting the water soak through my shirt. My mind flitted between old memories. Kathy hugging me when I got my new job. Kathy dancing barefoot in the kitchen. Kathy whispering that she wanted a family. Kathy lying with Jake. The images played back in flickers, each one a pang in my chest. I fumbled with the car keys, dropped them in a shallow puddle, cursed under my breath, and scooped them up again, hands shaking so badly I couldn't steady them. Finally, I slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled of stale coffee and the faint trace of air freshener. I sat there for a long moment, letting the water drip from my hair. My reflection stared at me in the rearview mirror. In the gloom, I caught a glimpse of my own eyes, hollow with shock, pupils dilated. A man on the edge. Who am I now, indeed? When I started the engine, I tried to think beyond the immediate. Did I want revenge? No, that wasn't the word for what churned inside me. It was more like wanting them all. Her family, even that bastard Jake, to stand witness to the consequences. I wanted them to face the fact that she'd lied to every single person who cared about her. I wanted the truth, raw and stinging, laid out for everyone to see, so they couldn't hide behind ignorance or half-truths. That was enough. The father would have to deal with his daughter's disgrace, the mother with her heartbreak, the sister with the shame of her blood kin. And Jake, let him relish the victory of winning someone else's wife, if you can even call that a victory. Let them both realize the fallout doesn't vanish just because the door shuts. I let out a harsh laugh, which turned into a cough. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. I jammed the car into reverse, pulled away from the curb. As I drove through the rain-slicked streets, my thoughts slid back to the moment I confronted the reality of my wife's child not being mine. I could still feel the letter in my hands, the dryness of the paper edges. Even though I suspected the truth, reading those results was like a blow to the gut. I must have stood there for a full minute, white noise roaring in my ears, my heart pounding. Now the tension in my chest felt enormous. I fiddled with the radio, but every station was static or late-night chatter I didn't want to hear. Another flash of lightning lit the empty road in front of me. The swirl of wind and rain battered my windshield. I kept replaying the conversation in the living room. Her father's fists, her mother's tear-streaked face, Kathy's silent acceptance, the shock in her sister's eyes, the old uncle's refusal to look up, the way Kathy's lips parted when she finally cried out. God, I'd never heard her sound like that, not even in our worst arguments. I tightened my hands on the steering wheel, fighting the wave of emotion. In the end, I did what I had to do. They saw the receipts. They heard her voice. They know about the test. This wasn't a rumor. They all witnessed tangible proof. I might not get closure anytime soon, but at least they know. At least I'm not the fool in the dark. Not anymore. I turned onto the highway, headlights cutting through the gloom. Rain hammered the roof in a constant onslaught. The patter got inside my skull, reminding me of that night at the pool. The drip of water off their bodies, the gasps that played like a broken record. In the half-lit corridor, I saw them pressed together, Jake's hands on her waist, her breathless moan. Part of me wanted to drive to that sports center, barge in, and find Jake. Demand an explanation. But what good would that do? He knows what he did. I could see his smirk in my mind. His arrogance, the lean, muscled figure that first caught Kathy's attention. She once told me how dedicated and inspiring he was as a coach. How strong, how confident. Maybe I had become too routine, too predictable. That's not an excuse for betrayal, but it's the reason she gave, more or less, when I tried to question her. The swirling thoughts made my head ache. My breath came out uneven. For a second, I considered pulling over, but I forced myself to keep going, slow and steady, lights reflected in endless waves of asphalt water. An hour passed, maybe more. I didn't have a destination in mind. Just kept driving. At some point the storm eased, the downpour fading into a light drizzle. My body felt bone-tired, but I still had adrenaline surging in my veins, so I pressed on. Finally, I spotted a small roadside diner, neon lights flickering open 24/7. My stomach growled. Maybe my body needed something normal. Warm coffee, a bite to eat. I pulled into the lot, parked under a broken street lamp. The building's sign was missing a letter, humming with an electric buzz that reminded me of a dying insect. I got out of the car, still soaked, and walked into the diner. A waitress with tired eyes, maybe in her 50s, greeted me with a nod. She wore a faded pink uniform and sported a name tag that read Linda. "You look like you've been caught in a flood," she said softly. I offered a tight smile. "Feels that way." She pointed to an empty booth by the window. I settled in, gazing outside at the glistening highway, my reflection half visible in the glass. She handed me a menu. "Coffee to start." "Sure," I replied. She disappeared. I shifted, trying to find a comfortable position, though nothing felt comfortable now. My clothes clung to my skin. Water dripped from my jacket onto the seat. A moment later, she returned with a steaming mug. "Rough night?" she asked gently. I could have spilled everything right there, but I didn't. I just gave a nod. "Yeah, something like that." She didn't push further. She handed me a paper napkin, and I thanked her. I noticed my reflection in the window again. Rain-slicked hair, eyes hollow. The face of a man who'd just destroyed his entire life. Or maybe realized it was already destroyed, and he only finished the job. I sipped the coffee. It was scalding and bitter, but it woke me up. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked the screen. A message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. "Ed, please come back. Let's talk. I need to explain." A wave of emotions struck me. My heart pounded. I typed out a response, my fingers shaking. Then I erased it. Typed again. Erased again. Finally, I just set the phone face down on the table, took another gulp of coffee, and let the bitterness ground me. Linda lingered by the counter, watching me with quiet concern. I cleared my throat, forced a polite smile, and glanced at the menu. Ordered a simple BLT sandwich. She nodded, took my order, and left me alone with my swirling thoughts. My mind returned to that phrase. It was your lesson. Maybe it was also mine. Perhaps we both learned something about illusions, about how trust can vanish in a single moment. As time dragged on, I pictured Kathy sitting in our living room, tears running down her face, her father storming around, her mother weeping, the sister trying to console someone beyond consolation. Maybe the old uncle was shaking his head, claiming he predicted this from the start. Maybe they were all cursing me for humiliating her in front of them. Or maybe they understood the depth of her betrayal. I didn't care which. I'd spoken my truth. That was enough. Linda brought the sandwich. I forced myself to take a few bites, though my appetite was gone. The diner was mostly empty, save for an older man in the corner sipping black coffee and reading a newspaper, and a young truck driver hunched over a plate of fries. The lights buzzed overhead in a monotone hum. Chewing felt mechanical, each swallow a reminder that I was alive. That life goes on. My phone buzzed again. Another message, presumably from her. I couldn't bring myself to check it yet. I looked out the window at the dark horizon, thinking about the next step. Maybe I should call my folks, let them know what happened. But it was late, and they lived in a different time zone. I wasn't sure how to explain anyway. Hey, Dad, I found out the baby's not mine. Kathy's been cheating, and I just destroyed her in front of her entire family. How's your day going? I snorted at the thought, a bitter, humorless sound. When I'd eaten half the sandwich and drunk enough coffee to settle my nerves, I left some cash on the table and stood up. Linda murmured a kind goodbye. The neon sign buzzed overhead, spitting out faint sparks in the drizzle. I got back into my car. The seat was still cold and damp. I started the engine, letting it idle as I stared at the phone again. Finally, I opened the messages. There were two. From the unknown number. Ed, please come back. Let's talk. I need to explain. K. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please. I felt my throat tighten. Sorry. She was sorry now. After the lies, the deception, the cruelty of letting me think I was going to be a father. A part of me wanted to call her right there and unleash the anger that trembled beneath the surface. Another part of me just felt exhausted. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pulled out onto the highway again. The rain was little more than a drizzle, though clouds still loomed overhead. Headlights illuminated the winding stretch of asphalt. What was left? A marriage is built on trust, on shared dreams. She shattered it. Sure, we had good years, but those memories felt twisted now, overshadowed by the knowledge that the child she carried wasn't mine. And she let me believe otherwise, at least for a time. Let her be sorry. Let her deal with that. My mind drifted to Jake. Could he be the father? Probably. Or maybe there was someone else too. Any possibility felt like a fresh stab. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles pale. She was always so careful about her image, about keeping up appearances in front of her parents and sister. And I'd respected that. I thought it was just a sign of wanting a tidy life. But maybe that desire for control, for admiration, was exactly what led her to him. He offered her some thrill, some flattering attention. She caved. Thunder grumbled somewhere far away, faint enough that I had to strain to hear it. The sky was still black, the moon hidden behind layers of clouds. Trees loomed on either side of the highway, their branches swaying, leaves glinting from the leftover rain. I felt the weight of exhaustion pulling at me. My eyes burned, my arms ached from the tension of gripping the steering wheel. Maybe I should find a motel, get a few hours of sleep, face the rest of my life in the morning. If any version of rest of my life even existed. Who am I now? I whispered into the empty car. No answer, just the soft hum of the engine. I spotted a motel sign up ahead and pulled in. The place looked worn, the paint peeling from the walls, a single flickering bulb near the office door. A tall chain-link fence surrounded the back. It wasn't inviting, but it was something. I parked, grabbed my phone and wallet, and trudged through the soggy lot toward the office. A drowsy attendant gave me a key after a brief exchange. Cash only, apparently. Maybe a front for something shady, but I didn't care. I just needed a bed. Room 107. The walls were a dull yellow, the carpeting stained. A musty odor clung to the air. The faint hum of a window AC unit provided background noise. I dropped onto the bed with a heavy sigh, leaving my wet jacket on a plastic chair by the door. For a long time, I stared at the cracked ceiling. My thoughts drifted to the ring on my finger. I held up my hand, letting the dull overhead light reflect off the band. It felt like an echo of a promise that no longer meant anything. Slowly, I twisted the ring, tugged it off. My hand felt naked. I set the ring on the nightstand. A swirl of emotions churned in my gut. Anger, grief, disbelief. It was all too fresh, too raw. The scene in the living room kept replaying. How her father's face darkened, how her mother turned away, how Kathy stammered, unable to muster a real defense. I closed my eyes, but the images wouldn't stop. Eventually, I curled up on the scratchy sheets, phone in hand, ignoring the messages from Kathy. I typed out a text to my brother, a short note. Hey, might need a place to crash for a bit. Let me know if that's okay. He was in another state, but we stayed in contact. I wasn't about to burden him with details over text. Not yet. Then I switched off my phone, letting the darkness and the hum of the AC cradle me into a restless sleep. Dawn seeped in through the dusty curtains, dull and gray. My eyes felt gritty. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling, the events of the previous night flooding back. For a second, I'd hoped it was a nightmare, but my ring on the nightstand reminded me it was all real. With a groan, I forced myself to sit up. My muscles felt stiff, and the stale motel air stung my nostrils. I flicked on my phone. A series of messages from Kathy again. One from my mother, who must have heard something from someone. A wave of dread settled in my stomach. I stood, took a quick, cold shower in a cramped stall. The water pressure was terrible. The towels smelled like bleach. Maybe that was a good thing. Cleaned something out of me. As I dressed in my damp clothes from the day before, I wondered if Kathy was at home, or if she'd run to Jake. The mental image of them together, arms entwined, stung me anew. I felt my pulse quicken. I tried to center myself. This was the new reality. I wasn't going back to that house, not to stay. I'd come for my things eventually, but I couldn't see her face just yet. The wound was too raw. My anger might boil over, or worse, I might break down. Outside, the morning was chilly and damp. I tossed my bag into the trunk, started the engine. My phone buzzed, but I refused to look at it yet. Let them wait. Let them all figure out how to pick up their pieces. I pulled out onto the road. My mind churned with plans. Perhaps I'd head to my office, talk to my boss, explain I needed a leave of absence, or maybe I'd throw myself into work to keep from drowning in bitterness. I gripped the wheel, hearing the quiet hum of the tires on wet asphalt. The weight on my chest felt suffocating. My thoughts turned again to that red swimsuit she wore in the locker room, how it was half pulled down around her waist, how Jake's hands slid over her wet skin. The betrayal, that heartbreak that squeezed my lungs until I could barely breathe. No, I told myself, don't do this right now. I forced my attention onto the road, counting the stripes of the lane divider, focusing on anything but the memory. It was no use. The memory had taken root, like a tumor. I made my way into the city, eventually finding a coffee shop near my workplace. Sat in the parking lot, engine idling, trying to decide my next step. A few coworkers' cars were there. Could I face them? Possibly not. I turned off the ignition, leaning back. My phone buzzed again. Finally, I took it out, scanning the messages. From Kathy, multiple times. Apologies, please, short exclamations. None of them meaningful enough to undo what she had done. From my mother, I heard something terrible. Please call me. What's happening, Ed? From my father, rarer for him to text. Son, talk to me. This is important. We're worried. From a friend. Dude, I heard some rumor that you outed Kathy in front of her parents. What's going on? I exhaled, typed quickly to my mother. I'm okay. I'll explain soon. Don't worry. Need a little time. And to my father, basically the same. Then I ignored my friend's message. I wasn't ready to be social or comedic about this. Eventually, I grabbed coffee inside, steeling myself against the curious glances of the barista. My reflection in the display case showed puffy eyes, lines of exhaustion. I looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. I sipped the coffee. It tasted bland, but at least it was warm. After a few minutes, I made a decision. I'd drive to a real estate agent's office, see if I could find a short-term rental or extended stay situation. My job allowed remote work for a while, so I could handle that. Or maybe, if the prices were right, I'd move into a small apartment. I needed distance from that house. Too many memories, too many ghosts. The day dragged on. By late afternoon, I'd found a furnished apartment that was willing to rent month to month at a high premium. I signed the paperwork, ignoring the knot in my gut that said I was uprooting my entire life on a whim. But it wasn't a whim. It was survival. The place was modest, a one-bedroom with plain walls and a battered couch. An air conditioner rattled in the corner, and the view from the window overlooked a narrow street lined with parked cars. I set my bag down by the door, flicked on the overhead light, and sank onto the couch. For a long while, I just stared at the empty wall. My phone lay on the coffee table, face down, messages piling up. I didn't want to read them. My throat felt raw again, tears threatening to rise. But I refused to shed them. I recalled the confrontation. That living room, the hush after I played Kathy's voice note, the heartbreak on her father's face, the condemnation from her mother, the tears of her sister, and Kathy's silence, then that single, strangled scream when I declared she'd sealed her own fate. I'd pictured her in that moment, eyes wide, hair falling loose from her ponytail, breath trembling as the reality sank in. She'd lost everything. We both had, but we lost it in different ways. I said I didn't want revenge, and that was mostly true. But there was a savage satisfaction in watching her illusions crumble in front of her family. Maybe that's vengeance enough. My phone buzzed, breaking me from my spiral. I glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Hey Ed, it's Jake. I need to talk to you." I stared. My pulse quickened. Anger flared in my chest. Jake had the nerve to contact me. Now, after sneaking around with my wife, fathering her child. My hands shook. For a moment, I considered ignoring him. Let him twist in the wind. But a sinister curiosity tugged at me. What did he want to say? Another lie? Or an apology? I had half a mind to give him a piece of my fury. I typed a terse reply. "What do you want?" Seconds later, 3 little dots appeared, indicating he was typing. Then his message popped up. "Man, I know this is messed up, but we gotta talk. Please, just meet me. One time." A cold wave slid down my spine. Did I really want to see him? Did I want to punch him in the face? Scream at him? Part of me did. Part of me wanted to break his nose. But I also felt an odd numbness. Something told me that going to meet him might offer closure, or it might tear the wound open wider. I found myself typing back. "Fine. Where?" He replied with an address, some sports bar halfway across town. "Tonight, 8 p.m. I checked the time. Just after 6. A swirl of dread built in my stomach. But I agreed anyway. All right. 8. I set the phone down. My heart hammered. What was I doing? Exposing myself to another confrontation could be disastrous. But maybe this was a final step, a final nail in the coffin of my old life. I pulled into the sports bar's dimly lit parking lot at 7:55 p.m. The rain had stopped entirely, leaving behind damp pavement and the smell of soaked concrete. A neon sign flickered above the entrance, casting a buzzing glow across the lot. I spotted Jake's car. My pulse thrummed with anger, with wariness. I got out, shoulders tense, and stepped inside. The place smelled of fried food and spilled beer, TVs mounted on the walls showing various sports channels. A few patrons clustered at tables, laughter and conversation humming beneath the overhead lights. Jake sat at a corner booth. When he saw me, He stood wearing a plain black t-shirt, jeans, looking more casual than the suave image I had of him. He lifted a hand in a half-wave. I approached, my jaw tight, fists involuntarily clenching. "Hey," he said quietly. I didn't respond. I slid into the booth, opposite him, letting the overhead light reveal every line of tension in my face. He swallowed, glancing away. "Thanks for coming. Do you want something to drink?" I shook my head once. "No." He rubbed his hands together, obviously nervous. "All right. Well, I ordered a beer. Figure I need it." I stared at him, waiting, letting the silence stretch. He cleared his throat. "Look, Ed, I'm sorry. Seriously, man. I never planned it. Kathy and I held up a hand. "I don't need the details. I know what you did." My voice was surprisingly even, though tension coiled in my gut. He winced. Right. I just want to say, I know I'm scum. You can punch me if you want. I deserve it. But it just happened. We spent a lot of time together, working out, planning the team's training schedule, and one night we had a drink, and one thing led to another. It shouldn't have kept happening, but it did. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to lunge across the table. "You destroyed my marriage. You realize that, right?" He nodded, eyes falling to the table. "I know. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I wanted to meet you because of the baby, Kathy's." He faltered. "Look, she told me it might be mine, but she wasn't sure. I never tried to force her to hide it from you. I swear." Anger flared again. "But you slept with her. Again and again, from what I've seen." He nodded, guilt etched across his face. "Yeah, I did, and I deserve whatever's coming. But I'm not going to run from responsibility if that baby is mine. I'm telling you, if she decides to keep it, I'll support it." My stomach twisted. "You think that changes anything? You think that helps me? Or her family?" He exhaled heavily, glancing at the beer in front of him. "I guess not. But, Ed, man, I feel awful. I've been beating myself up. She said she was unhappy, that you were never around, that you didn't see her. I guess I believed her sob story and fell right in." I let out a bitter chuckle. "So it's my fault? Is that it?" "No, God, no. I'm just trying to explain how I rationalized it to myself. I was lonely, she was lonely. I know that's no excuse, but it's the truth." Silence stretched. I could barely stand looking at him, but I forced myself to remain seated, as if leaving now would let him off too easily. He continued, voice subdued. "I'm going to step down as her supervisor. I'm telling the sports center management. I'll probably get a warning or something. I don't care. My sister told me I should come clean." My throat felt tight. This man, with his lean, athletic build, his confident posture, he was deflated now, eyes red-rimmed, regret lacing his words. Maybe it was genuine, but it didn't erase the damage done. I spoke quietly. "I didn't come here for a confession, Jake. I came because you asked. Part of me wanted to see if you'd lie or try to blame me. Seems you're not that stupid." He shook his head, looking miserable. "No, I'm not blaming you. It's on me too. I messed up your life, and that's something I'll have to live with." My jaw tensed. I studied his face, searching for any sign of arrogance. There was none. All I saw was a man who realized he'd done something unforgivable and was now drowning in shame. "All right," I said finally, standing up. My legs felt shaky. "You do whatever you have to do. You live with it. I've said my piece. Now we're done." He stood too, eyes darting nervously. "Ed, wait." I cut him off, voice cold. "Don't contact me again. If Kathy is carrying your baby, you two handle that. I'm out." He opened his mouth as if to argue, but then lowered his gaze. "Yeah, all right." I turned on my heel and strode out, my heart hammered like a drum adrenaline flooding me. Part of me wanted to smash something. The bar, his face. But I didn't. I just left, walking into the damp night air. Outside, the air was still heavy with the lingering threat of more rain. Clouds drifted across the sky. I got into my car and slammed the door, forcing myself to breathe slowly until my pulse settled. He'd apologized, owned up to it. But the shards of betrayal were still lodged in my chest. A final wave of anger and sorrow welled up, and I pounded the steering wheel, letting out a strangled cry. Then I just sat there, trembling. This was my life now. The cheated husband, the man left with a ghost of a future that would never be. A father to nobody. A husband to a woman who'd pinned her hopes on another man's attention. I pulled out of the parking lot. My phone rang. Kathy's number. I rejected the call. My chest felt tight, suffocating. I drove aimlessly through the city for a while, the skyline glittering with distant lights. Cars whizzed by, everyday people going about their routine. I felt alien, severed from normal life. Eventually, I found myself back at the apartment complex. I went inside, shut the door, and just stood there in the dark, letting the emptiness ring in my ears. The air conditioner clicked on, humming softly. I flicked on a small lamp in the corner. Light spilled over the plain walls. My reflection in the window looked like a specter. I wandered to the tiny kitchen area, turned on the faucet, splashed water on my face. The mirror above the sink was streaked, but I could see my tired eyes. The hollow look. A question emerged, the same one that haunted me. Who am I now? I thought of Kathy's pleas, Jake's apology, her family's devastation. None of it gave me closure. But I realized closure might not come for a long time, maybe ever. I had to rebuild from scratch, figure out who Edward Collins was without the illusions of a happy marriage. And so I let a slow breath fill my lungs. The pain was there, scalding. The bitterness, raw. But I was still breathing, still standing. This was my life, my burden and my chance for a new start. I swallowed hard, turned off the faucet, and walked to the window. Rain began anew, pattering on the glass, weaving faint rivulets across the pane. A soft, steady hush. I pressed my forehead against the cool surface, eyes closing. I pictured the old living room scene one last time. Me showing them the truth, calling out her betrayal, hearing her final wail as I stepped away. And then I let the image fall behind me, swallowed by the night. Somewhere, thunder rumbled, distant and low. The apartment was silent. I knew at last that there was no going back. The door had closed, and I was on the other side. Time to face whatever comes next.